A man Riley had never seen before grabbed her wrist across the counter and twisted. Hard, deliberate. The kind of grip that says, "I've done this before." His name was Cole, fixer, hired to find her. Riley couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. Her back hit the cigarette display and she had nowhere left to go. Then the man at the coffee carafe turned around. Fluorescent light caught his cut. Death head patch, red and white thread. Wings spread wide. Her father had worn that exact patch every day of her life. Her mouth moved before she could stop it. My dad wore that patch, barely a whisper. But Donovan Cinder Briggs, Sergeant at Arms, Hell's Angels Nomads, Nevada, heard every word. He stopped moving. What he did next, nobody in that gas station has ever forgotten. This is Heart Tales. Here's the full story.
The asphalt meets the door, Sergeant. Say that again and see what happens.
Cole's grip on her wrist didn't loosen. He pulled her forward across the counter. Not fast, not dramatic. Just steady and deliberate, the way a man moves when he knows nobody in the room is going to stop him. "You've been hard to find," he said. "That's going to change tonight." Riley's elbow hit the register. The drawer popped open and a handful of quarters scattered across the linoleum. Neither of them looked down. She ran the numbers in her head the way she always did. Two of Cole's men were inside. One at the front door. One in the aisle by the coolers, arms crossed, watching. A third was outside in the parking lot, standing by the lead SUV with his jacket open just enough. The Mossberg was under the counter, 12 inches from her left hand. Might as well have been 12 miles. Cole leaned in. "There's a way this goes easy," he said. "And there's the other way. I've done this enough times to know which one you want." She didn't answer. She had learned a long time ago that silence was the only thing that cost nothing. The fluorescent tube above the coffee station hummed. It had been flickering for 6 weeks. Cole's man by the coolers shifted his weight, checked his watch. She had maybe 90 seconds before someone decided patience was overrated. And then the man at the coffee carafe turned around. She had registered him when he walked in. Leather cut, big frame, unhurried, and filed him the way she filed everything. Not a threat, not a resource, just another body in the space. But now the fluorescent light caught the back of his cut full on as he reached for a lid. She saw it. Death head patch, center back, red and white thread on black felt, wings spread wide, skull forward, edges worn soft from years on the road. The air went out of her lungs. She knew that patch. She knew it the way you know something that lives in your hands before it lives in your head. Her father had worn that exact patch every day of her life until the day he didn't anymore. She used to fall asleep in the back of his truck with her cheek pressed against it. Cole was still talking. She couldn't hear him anymore. Her mouth moved. "My dad wore that patch." Barely sound. Less than a whisper. Cole stopped. Not because he heard her. He didn't, but the man at the coffee carafe did. He went still first. That was the thing she would remember later, the specific quality of that stillness. Not startled. Not confused. The way a man goes still when he hears a word he has been waiting 18 years to hear, and wasn't sure he ever would. His hand was on the coffee lid. It stayed there. Cole yanked her arm. "I said, look at me." The man set the coffee lid down on the counter. Slowly, deliberately. Like a man setting down something he no longer needed. And then Donovan Cinder Briggs turned around. He was 52 years old and built like something assembled rather than born. Wide through the shoulder, thick through the neck. A face that had been rearranged by life a few times and had settled into something that no longer bothered being readable. His eyes went to Cole's hand on Riley's wrist, then to Cole's face. He didn't speak. Cole felt it. His grip loosened, just slightly, just enough. And in that half-second of recalibration, Riley's hand came free. Cole smiled. The kind of smile men use when they want to reassert that they're still in charge of what's happening. "You want to walk away from this," Cole said. "Trust me." Cinder reached into his jacket. Cole's man by the coolers went for his waistband. What Cinder pulled out was a phone. He looked at it for a moment. Then he looked back at Cole, with an expression that wasn't a threat and wasn't a warning. It was something quieter and more final than either of those things. The expression of a man who has already made his decision and is simply now living through the formality of it. He dialed, let it ring once, 4 words. US 93, Sagebrush stop. He hung up. Cole stared at him. "Who did you just call?" Cinder set the phone on the counter beside his coffee. He didn't answer. Riley stood against the cigarette display, with her heart slamming against her ribs and her eyes on the man who had just done the quietest, most certain thing she had ever seen another human being do. But this story didn't start tonight. And to understand why that phone call was about to bring 83 motorcycles down US 93 at 2:17 in the morning, you have to go back to where it actually began, 18 years ago, and a man named Wyatt Maddox who made a decision nobody ever fully forgave him for. Riley Maddox grew up in Reno in a house that smelled like motor oil and instant coffee. Her father worked on engines the way other men worked on crossword puzzles, with total absorption and the quiet satisfaction of someone who understood exactly what he was doing and why. The smell of him, grease and Old Spice and something underneath that she never had a name for, was the smell of safety. Wyatt died when Riley was 8. Motorcycle accident on the Sierra Nevada Pass, the police said. Lost control on a wet curve. By the time anyone found the wreckage, it had burned. Carol took Riley and moved them to Henderson 3 weeks later without fully explaining why, and enrolled Riley in a new school under Carol's maiden name, Carr. Said only that it was easier this way, and that she needed Riley to be brave. Riley was 8 years old. She was brave. She learned not to ask questions. She learned instead to read rooms, to track the subtle shift in a space when something was wrong. The way silence had different textures depending on what was causing it. Carol died of cancer when Riley was 21. Riley had $1,140 in her checking account, a 2009 Honda Civic with a cracked windshield, and no particular reason to stay in Henderson. She drove north, then west, then south. Eventually, almost accidentally, ended up at a cinder block gas station on US 93 called the Sagebrush Stop that had a handwritten sign in the window that said "Help Wanted" and meant it. She was not hiding, exactly. She was resting. There is a difference. The memory of her father lived in her hands more than her head. It was a Saturday in late September, the light coming in sideways and gold across the garage floor. Wyatt was working on a neighbor's pickup. Riley sat on an overturned milk crate, eating a peanut butter sandwich, watching him work. He was wearing his cut. The death head patch center back. Red and white thread on black felt. She had looked at it so many times, it had stopped being something she saw and become something she simply knew. The way you know the sounds of your own front door. She reached out and touched it. Wyatt looked over his shoulder. Then he set down his wrench, pulled up a second milk crate, and sat down across from her. You know what that patch means? She shook her head. It means I belong to a family, he said. The kind where everybody watches out for everybody else, no matter what. The kind where if you're in trouble and you can't say it out loud, you don't have to. She asked how. He picked up a shop rag from the workbench, red, faded, folded it once, folded it again, tucked one corner under, and set it on the floor between them in a very specific shape. That, he said, is how. The patch tells you who to trust. You see that patch on a man's back. That's how you know he's family. But if you're already in trouble and you can't say it out loud, you do this. He tapped the folded rag. Exactly this. They'll know. How will they know? She asked. Because they've been taught to look, he said. Same way I taught you. He handed her the rag. She turned it over in her hands. He was quiet for a moment after that. Long enough that she looked up at him. If something ever happens to me, he said, not looking at her, looking at the transmission. There are people who will look for you. People who know your name. They'll find you when it's safe. He paused. I'm going to make sure of that. She didn't know what to say. She was 8 years old. She said, okay. He nodded, went back to work. She sat on the milk crate and held the red shop rag and thought that this was probably something she would never need. She never forgot it either. Warren Cole came into the Sagebrush Stop for the first time on a Wednesday in February, 7 months after Riley started. He drove a dark gray Nissan Pathfinder and wore a jacket that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He was 6 feet even, lean through the shoulder, with the face of a man who had been told often enough that he was reasonable that he had started to believe it completely. He came back. And again. Always graveyard shift. Always the same ease, the same questions that felt like conversation and landed like reconnaissance. 2 weeks after he sent 3 people to follow her home, Cole came in himself. We've been very patient, Riley. My father died when I was 8, she said, in a motorcycle accident. Cole smiled, a small, careful smile. Your father made a choice, he said. Choice have consequences. That's not a threat. That's just how accountability works. He left the coffee on the counter and walked out. Riley watched his taillights disappear onto US 93 and understood with complete clarity that the thing she had been waiting for had arrived. Not the moment to run, the moment to be ready. She updated her go bag, kept the Mossberg chambered, watched the highway. Tonight had started like every other night. 10 p.m., open the door, start the coffee, count the till. At 11:40, a trucker named Davis stopped for diesel and jerky. At 1:36, a dark Suburban pulled off US 93 and sat at the far end of the parking lot with its engine running. At 1:51, a second vehicle joined the first, then a third, then a fourth. She had not planned for 4. Her hands went flat on the counter. She ran the calculation, exits, options, angles, seconds, and came up with the same answer every time. There was no exit, not the obvious kind. At 2:09, the door opened and Donovan Cinder Briggs walked in for a cup of coffee and a break from 300 miles of Nevada highway. He did not know who Riley Carr was. He did not know who her father had been. He just wanted coffee. He was reaching for a lid when she said it, 6 words. Barely a sound. But he heard them. He had been taught a long time ago to listen for exactly that. He set the lid down on the counter. And outside, something began to happen that started not with headlights, but with sound. A low vibration felt in the sternum before the ears registered it, building from the north like weather. 83 Harley-Davidson engines. Coming fast. Cole heard it first. He was standing 15 feet from the front door when his head came up. The sound built the way thunder builds when it's still too far away to have a shape. A pressure in the air that registered in the chest before the ears caught up. Then the lights appeared. Not 1, not 10. A wall of them, cresting the low rise 3 miles up the highway. Headlight after headlight in staggered formation, filling both lanes and then the shoulder, an unbroken river of white light moving south at speed. 83 Harleys came off US 93 in formation. They moved the way a tide moves, with total indifference to whatever was in the way. They filled the parking lot in under 90 seconds. Not parked, positioned, forming a perimeter around the 4 black Suburbans. Engines stayed running. Headlights stayed on, all of them angled inward, flooding the lot with light so dense. The Suburbans looked like they'd been caught in a spotlight. Cole stood at the glass door and understood, for the first time in 20 years of doing what he did, that the room had changed completely around him, and he had not been the one to change it. He turned around. Cinder was leaning against the coffee counter with his arms crossed, watching him. He had not moved. He had not drawn anything. He was drinking his coffee. You called them, Cole said. Cinder didn't answer. Cole straightened his jacket. This doesn't change the situation. This is a private matter between my employers and this woman. You have no stake in it. Cinder looked at Riley. She was still behind the counter, eyes steady now. Not calm exactly, but present. He looked back at Cole. She's Wyatt Maddox's daughter, he said. The name landed in the room like something dropped from a height. Cole's breathing changed, a barely perceptible pause, a single beat where his chest didn't move. That's not possible, Cole said. Maddox's daughter died with, she didn't. Cole looked at Riley again, really looked. The shape of her jaw, the color of her eyes, the way she held herself behind that counter, still and watchful. That doesn't change what she owes, he said. Her father rode off a mountain pass, Cinder said, so that his family would be left alone. Flat, final. The tone of a man stating a fact that has been true for 18 years. He burned his own savings, made sure your people saw the fire, and rode off that pass so his daughter could grow up under a different name with nobody following her. Outside, 83 engines idled, and for a moment, just a moment, something moved across Cole's face. The look of a man who has been operating under a set of assumptions for so long that he forgot they were assumptions and has just had one of them removed. He recovered fast. Men like Cole always do. You can't prove any of that, he said. Don't need to. My employers have documentation. Your employers, Cinder said, are currently watching 83 of my brothers surround their vehicles on a federal highway in the state of Nevada. And the FBI field office in Las Vegas received a full dossier on Coldstone Advisory LLC 45 minutes ago. Everything our people had been tracking for the last 8 weeks. Wire transfers, account numbers. The Henderson job, the Reno job, the 3 jobs before that. All of it. Cole went still. Not the practiced stillness of a man controlling a room. The stillness of a man who has just understood that the room ended without him noticing. "You're bluffing," he said. Cinder looked at him with the expression of a man who has not bluffed in a very long time and sees no reason to start spart. 4 words. "Check your phone, Cole." Cole didn't move for 3 full seconds. Then his hand went to his jacket pocket. He looked at the screen. Whatever he saw there drained the remaining composure from his face, the way water drains from a cracked container. Slowly at first. Then all at once. From behind the counter, Riley Maddox, not Carr, not anymore, not ever again, watched Warren Cole understand for the first time in 20 years that he was not the most dangerous presence in the room. A trucker named Gary Fitch, who had been sitting in his cab watching the parking lot for the last 20 minutes. Later, told the Clark County Sheriff's deputy, who took his statement, that the biker didn't yell, didn't threaten, didn't even raise his voice. He just looked at the guy, Gary said. And the guy kind of folded. That was exactly what happened. Warren Cole folded. The first federal vehicle arrived at 2:41. 2 agents in FBI windbreakers. The senior agent was a woman named Diane Howell, mid-40s, the kind of tired that comes from being good at a difficult job for a long time. "Which one of you is Briggs?" Cinder raised 2 fingers from his coffee cup. "We got your package." She looked at Cole. "Mr. Cole, I'm going to need you to come with us." They were walked out through the front door into the white light of 83 headlights. Cole stopped once, halfway across the lot. He had seen something visible through the gap between 2 Suburbans, the highway. US 93 running north into the dark, empty and straight and going somewhere, the way highways always are. Cole had spent 20 years moving along roads like that one. He had believed, in the way that people believe things they have never had reason to question, that the road was his, that he could always be the one leaving. He stood in the parking lot of the Sagebrush stop at 2:47 in the morning, and understood that he had been wrong about that. The choices he had made, 20 years of them. Each one reasonable in the moment, each one justified by the logic of the job and the belief that accountability was something that happened to other people. Lined themselves up in his mind with a clarity that had not been available to him before tonight. Not because he was a bad man who had never considered his actions. Because he was a man who had been very good at not having to. Nobody had ever put 83 motorcycles in his way before. He got in the expedition. The door closed. Cinder came back inside after the agents left. He stood on the customer side of the counter and looked at her. She said, "How long have you been looking for me?" "Since the month after your father died. Lost the trail in Henderson when you're moved. Found it again 8 weeks ago." He set something on the counter between them. An envelope, standard letter size, white, slightly yellowed at the edges, sealed. Her name was written on the front in handwriting she had not seen in 16 years, and recognized in the space of a single breath. Her hand stopped shaking. "He left this with your chapter," she said. "It wasn't a question. Left it with our president the week before he died. Said to find you when it was safe. Said you'd know when it was safe because someone wearing the patch would have found you first." He paused. "It took longer than it should have. I'm sorry for that." She looked up at Cinder. "What was he like?" He was quiet for a moment. "The kind of man," he said finally, "that you only understand after he's gone." She nodded. She knew something about that. Cinder picked up his coffee, finished it, set the cup on the counter. "You going to be all right?" he said. It was the first time anyone had asked her that in a long time. Not as performance, not as formality, just a plain question, directed at her like she was the kind of person whose answer mattered. "Yeah," she said. "I think so." He nodded once, zipped his jacket, moved toward the door. "Cinder." He stopped. "Thank you," she said. He didn't answer. He just pushed through the door and walked across the lot to his bike. A man who had done what he came to do and saw no particular reason to make more of it than that. The last of the 83 bikes pulled out onto US 93, heading north. The sound built and then faded the way the sound had come. Slow at first, then all at once, then gone, leaving a silence so complete that the fluorescent tube's flicker was the loudest thing in the room. Riley stood behind the counter with an envelope in her hands and the first light of dawn beginning to gray, the eastern edge of the desert sky. She made a fresh pot of coffee, waited for it to finish. Then she sat down on the floor behind the counter, back against the cigarette display, knees up, the envelope in her lap, and opened it. Inside was a letter, 3 pages, handwritten, and a photograph, her, at 4 years old, sitting on the gas tank of her father's bike in the driveway of the house in Reno, laughing at something off camera, her whole face open and unguarded in the way that faces only are when they don't know yet that there are things worth guarding against. On the back of the photograph, in her father's handwriting, she always knew how to laugh. Make sure she doesn't forget. She sat there for a long time. 6 months later, the Sagebrush stop got a new fluorescent tube. Riley put it in herself on a Tuesday afternoon. It took 11 minutes. The old tube had been flickering for 8 months. She didn't know why she'd waited so long to fix it, except that some things take time to be ready for. The new light was steady and clean and lit the store from wall to wall without missing anything. A trucker named Gary Fitch stopped in that afternoon for diesel and jerky, the way he did most Tuesdays. He noticed the photograph on the wall beside the coffee station. "That you?" he said. "When I was 4, she said. "Who's the bike?" "My dad's." He nodded. "Set a 20 on the counter. He teach you to ride?" She made his change. Set it down between them. "He taught me a lot of things," she said. "Took me a while to figure out which ones." Gary pocketed his change and went back out to his truck. Riley watched the door close behind him. Then she turned back to the counter and went to work. There's something people get wrong about men like Wyatt Maddox. They assume the sacrifice is the story. The dramatic act, the mountain pass, the fire, the disappearance. The moment a man became something larger than himself. But that's not where the story lives. The story lives in a Saturday morning in a garage in Reno. A milk crate. A red shop rag folded into a shape that meant something. A father sitting across from his daughter and deciding, without ceremony, that she deserved to know that the world had hidden exits, and that someone would always be on the other side of them if she knew how to ask. Wyatt Maddox didn't die because he was brave. He died because he could not imagine a world that had his daughter in it, and didn't have him watching out for her. And when he understood that he couldn't do both, exist and protect her, he chose the only option that kept her safe. That's not heroism. That's something quieter, and harder, and more human than heroism. That's love making a decision in the dark, without any guarantee that it would work, without any way of knowing if she would ever find out why. She found out. 16 years later, in a gas station on US 93 at 2:17 in the morning, with her hands flat on a linoleum counter and a man in a leather cut standing 12 feet away, she found out. It was a little girl who paid attention, who sat on a milk crate in a garage and listened, who carried a folded memory for 16 years and never let go of it, even when she didn't know what she was carrying it for. Some people spend their whole lives looking for the obvious exits, the ones clearly marked, well-lit, easy to find. Riley Maddox found a different kind. The kind her father left for her. The kind that only opens when someone else is on the other side, waiting. If you or someone you know is in danger, help is available around the clock. The National Human Trafficking Hotline is free, confidential, and available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The number is 1-888-373-7888. You do not have to be certain. You do not have to have all the answers. You only have to make the call. If this story stayed with you, if there was a moment, a detail, something you can't quite shake, tell me about it in the comments below. I read every single one, and I want to know which part hit you hardest. Was it the patch, the garage, the letter? Or was it the photograph of a 4-year-old girl on a gas tank in a driveway in Reno, laughing at something off camera? Taken by a man who already knew, even then, that he was running out of time, and wanted to make sure someone remembered what her laugh looked like. If you're new here, welcome. This is Heart Tales. Stories about ordinary people in ordinary places doing the most extraordinary thing a human being can do. Deciding that someone else matters enough to act. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And before you go, there are 2 more stories waiting for you on screen right now. I think you'll want to stay. Thank you for watching. Thank you for making it to the end. That means more than you know.